walk. We must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied.
Hey, we want to welcome everybody to You and the Law podcast show. This is our special episode of as we come up on the Martin Luther King holiday. I am one of the co-hosts of the show, Virgil Green, and as always, the bearded guy that's got the hat on tonight goes by the name of Chief Swaggy One. How you doing?
What's up, bro?
Man, not a whole lot, brother. How you doing?
I'm good, bro. Let's see another day, man, and excited about this show. And we're coming up on MLK holiday, and so man, excited. Just really excited, man. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing good. I'm doing good, brother. Man, just trying to stay warm, man, and looking forward to the ML King holiday. Quite a few events I'll be attending this weekend, and looking forward to being a part of those celebrations in honor of Dr. King's holiday. And Keith, there's an event I'm going to be part of where there's a lady named Rose McGee. She's the owner of Sweet Potato Pie Comfort. And she makes these sweet potato pies. And she actually took some sweet potato pies down to Ferguson, Missouri, when the whole incident that took place down there many years ago. Mm-hmm. And so she's going to have something like 94 sweet potato pies that her organization will make, and there's going to be everybody will be carrying one of the sweet potato pies. And I didn't realize that Martin Luther King would be 94 years old this Monday.
Yeah, 1929, man.
Yeah. So I mean, and I guess as we talk about the topic today, we talk about ML King policing in America the last 50 plus years. Makes you wonder if Martin Luther King would be alive today. How much would things be any different with knowing the impact that his voice had on civil rights back in the 60s? And the things that he was able to accomplish with so many others, but it makes you wonder in this conversation, would things be any different some 60 years later almost?
Man, I don't know. I will tell you, I know he would be very pleased when we've had our first Black president. I think he would be very pleased with the different civic programs that's been started. The number of minority businesses, the melting pot that the United States have become. But I do think, and I'll speak freely, I do think that he would really believe that we have gone backwards when it comes to voters' rights, and when it comes back to violent crime. And I think when it comes down to the fact of police shootings of African-American men and women, I think immigration, I think that he would believe that those things still are major problems that the United States is dealing with, the nation is dealing with. When you think about the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1963, that's 50 and almost 60 years ago. It's not a long time, and that's our lifetime. And you think about, talk about the Voters' Rights Act and things like that. and all of the things that are going on, things that he went to jail for, things that people were killed about. I think he would be pleased with there is room for people to protest, peacefully protest, but also I think he would be very disappointed with that there's still some law enforcement agencies are heavy-handed when it comes to protest. And so I think also, so I think, yes, I think I would feel comfortable to say 65% he would be happy. And I think the other 35% or even maybe 40%, it would be absolutely, he would be heartbroken.
Yeah. Well, Keith, and you know, one of the things that you know reminds me is the Civil Rights Act. I think it was a John Lewis. I may not be pronouncing it the correct form of the legislation, but the John Lewis bill that was they were trying to pass last legislative session that did not get passed. The fact that you've got so many states who have kind of repealed some of the Civil Rights Act of 1963, that you know, the fact that we're, and like you stated, that we're going backwards instead of moving forward, and the fact that, and I'm gonna ask you this question, Keith, and for those who are listening, and you can you know, put your comments in the chat room. To some degree, do you believe that we have kind of went almost, we have not seen the things that we saw in 1963? I mean,
Why you say that? We have.
oh, well,
I disagree with you on that.
Well, and what I'm meaning is we've seen the type of police brutality, but we haven't seen what people saw in 63 and 64 with people being hosed with water hoses and people dogs being used on black people being peacefully marching.
That we know about. Now, you're talking about that maybe haven't made the news, but you still have people being lynched, Virgil. You still have people that are being that are not given their Miranda warnings and being put in jail for unnecessary amounts of time. I think what we have to be really careful about is, although you and I came along in that era, we did not live that era. I mean, we remember some of the things, we remember the tailing, but it's kind of hard to say that we have, because it may not be to that exact incident. Yeah. But it could be something that's very similar. So something replaces something.
Yeah. And throughout this podcast show, you know, I've got some video footage to show, especially when, you know, a part of Dr. Martin Luther King's speech that day, a lot of it was about so many other social issues. But as we heard in the clip that I played at the opening of the show, where he talked about police brutality, they were talking about police brutality back in 1963, and that had occurred for a very long time. And here we are some 60 years later, still talking about police brutality across so many communities in this country. And
we're talking about violence. We're talking about violence as a whole in the nation.
Well, violence as a whole, police brutality. And I think there were just so many things that Dr. King and those a part of the civil rights era talked about, you know, the social injustice, the poverty, all of those things are still happening 60 years later. And you know, and I think this is also a part of the Kerner Commission report that came out in 1968 under President Johnson, who was president when during the civil rights era, that all these things were known back then. But as we've talked about on this podcast show so many times before, nothing came out of that Kerner Commission report.
Well, it did. Something did come out.
Well, it showed
Proved,
about it. It
yeah,
proved what was going
proved what
on.
people have been saying, what was going
Yeah,
on. Now,
yeah.
have there been any solutions to it? Did anybody at that particular time try to change things and to make those changes that were brought up at that time? No. But have there been changes now? Or have there been uh, efforts to make changes now? There has been. And so, and when you say John Lewis, man, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my brothers of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, our 109th anniversary, and John Lewis was um, a prominent member of our organization. So when you talk about John Lewis, I got to shout out to the frat J9109.
Well, and man, to look back, Keith, at some of the horrific images of what took place in Selma, how John Lewis and so many others were brutally beaten by state troopers and local law enforcement back then, and for John Lewis to rise to the level of where he became very powerful within the policy making, and the fact that you've got, Keith, and I'm gonna say this. I think this past week we saw the dysfunction of our government on the federal side, where it took them so long to get a Speaker of the House. And what gets me, Keith, is the fact that I saw these grown men who were supposed to be all educated
And women.
attorneys of women who acted so childish, who, I'm watching McCarthy every time he stand up, he button up his coat and all this other kind of stuff. And he put on this persona and everybody says, my friends on the other aisle. How much of a friend are these people? And it's only like it's in words only, because there is no friendship there. When you have these grown people who have been elected to represent everybody, even for those who didn't vote for them, and they can't even pass a bill that is named after one of their former colleagues, that says a lot about the still racial divide between this country and and those who are in positions to create legislation.
There's a cold world out here, man, and with it being a cold world, and they put a cold world out there, and then put people who are entrenched with wanting to have power. And then when you have power, I mean, you think about this, man. You've got 300 and something, or let's say 300 people, and I know I may be going over, but 300 people that are making decisions for the entire country. And you don't think people have their own hidden agendas? You don't think people are in the pockets of other people?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes it's just about popularity. It's about power. It's not about doing the right thing. It's because you think about it, and this is Republican and Democrat. You think about some of the things that people say, and you're like, man, it really? I mean, some of the disheartening things that people say, and things that the way people exercise First Amendment rights, up to a point of where you can't say that it's disrespectful. It gets up to that point that you can't say it's, even if you do, well, it's within the right. So people use, and I've always said that there are people who use the First Amendment to their benefit when they mean no good to anyone else. And so they almost got into a fight last week.
Yeah.
And these are the people that are making the rules.
Yeah.
Almost got in a fight on the floor.
Yeah. Almost got into a fight on the floor. You've got people who have just lied about their character, who are being sworn into office. And you've got, all these different groups who, like you said, they've got their own agenda. And we as Americans are caught up in the middle of that, and it makes you wonder, you know, even the people who have voted for them to be there, because they are there because of people voted them into these positions. And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, if you're not there for the right reasons, uh, that's we are going to continue to see this country be so divided. And the fact that when President Obama was in office, you saw how basically Mitch McConnell then basically said, we're not going to allow you to pass any kind of legislation that's going to really impact this country as a whole. His administration literally had to fight to get things passed during his 8 years in office. And so and it just kind of reflects on, as we talk about the ML King policing in America in the last 50 years, what has policing done to eliminate police brutality?
The platform is there, the training is there, the courses are there, the continuing education is there. So we can't say that the platform and resources aren't there. If anybody says that, that's totally false. They're there.
Correct.
It's the fact of how are we holding people accountable? I mean,
leadership.
Are you pushing that these are the things that you will follow when it comes to protests? Are you sitting down with the leaders of these groups that are getting ready to march? Whether it's it's and people ask, well, how do you do this? I remember in my time as a police chief, I mean, sitting down with members of the KKK to let them know, hey, you have a First Amendment right to protest. However, these are the rules. Yeah. And so when you do that, sitting down with members of the Occupy movement, hey, this is what we expect. I think, are we doing that? Are we just wiping people off because they are Black Lives Matter or because they are, KKK or some form of extremist? Are we, because someone is extremely liberal, are we brushing them off and not having meetings with them? Are we showing favoritism toward groups that we may have something in common with? And so that's the thing that we're doing. Are we just saying we're doing that?
Yeah.
And that's a lot. Are we uncomfortable as a chief, as a Black chief? Are you uncomfortable going to a predominantly white community or predominantly Hispanic community? As a white chief, are you uncomfortable going into a predominantly African American community to talk about it? Are your policies online where people can question or ask questions?
Yeah.
So the platform's there. There's never been a better platform. We've never had, although I know how social media can wear you out and not be your friend. Sometimes it can be a positive when it comes to law enforcement about getting things out there about your organization and the things that you're doing. But it's only as good as the person who's carrying the message and who's implementing the philosophies and what their expectations are.
Yeah. Well, Keith, I'm going to ask, you made reference to, Black police chiefs, white police chief, both, Black police chief going into, predominantly white area, white police chief coming into a predominantly, Black community. And as we talk about the ML King policing in America in the last 50 years, what's your opinions on do Black police chiefs have a much better sense and knowledge of what's going on to where they're able to go into any community to speak with the white community the Black community, the Latino community, the Asian community,
I,
the LGBTQ community versus a, and not to make this sound like it's a racist suggestion, but is there a difference in how the two are able to go in and build and talk and build some positive relationships?
yeah, it depends on your heart and your sincerity. It depends on what's your reason for being a chief. Um, all the things that you're saying in those processes to get you the chief job, do you really mean that?
Do you? Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and the thing about it is, man, it's all about what your heart is, what your intentions are, what your passion is, how humble you are.
yeah,
Um, do you just assume because you're the chief, people are going to respect you? Um, are you saying one thing to the community? You know, are you a black chief saying one thing to the African American community, but you're going back to your command staff saying something that's
something
totally
different.
opposite?
Yeah,
Uh, Same thing on the other end. And so I think that's the deal. I think that there are African American chiefs that do have a broader understanding of what's really going on in the country, what's actually going on in those communities, and what is needed. I think there are those who have that ability to break that tension, or to even start a conversation on how to break the tension. But
yeah,
I know guys that I've worked with, black and white, you know, chiefs, that man, they say one thing, and then when you really talk to them and they're afraid to do it, they don't believe in it.
yeah.
The main focus is they wanted the chief's title. So I think it can be done. As a matter of fact, I
Mhm.
know it can be done. I know it's part of the job, but I think some people forget that.
Yeah. Well, Keith, and and I think that's the thing, as we talk about, you know, ML King and everything that he did during the civil rights era, the fact that John Lewis, what was one of his favorite quotes? You gotta, what was it, Keith? You gotta do something to good trouble. What was it?
Good trouble, man. It's good
Yeah,
trouble, man.
good
It's good
trouble,
trouble, man. If
and
you're gonna get
and
in trouble, get in good
get in
trouble.
good trouble. And so I've seen, and you have as well. I've seen blacks, people who look like me and you, who, man, they're not finna cross that line to speak out and say some things, even though it's good, but they are so afraid and worried about losing what they have instead of standing up and calling out those bad things.
Well, you had a supervisor tell you one time, I'm not gonna lose my job. My 50 some thousand dollar job is more important
Yeah,
than what you
yeah,
than your
yeah.
job.
Well,
I'm gonna do whatever I can do, whatever I need to do to hold on to that.
yeah,
Uh, it's and that's one of go back to when we talk about law enforcement, man. That's why I'm totally against law enforcement being a part of politics. And that's why I really have a problem with organizations supporting different candidates, because it does become political. And and when you start doing that, then when you have a candidate that says, "Hey, hit them upside the head," or "We need to use more force, bring back the good old days," then you're going to be tied in with that as law enforcement.
yeah,
You're going to be tied in with that. I hate to see these sheriffs, man, on TV, man, supporting, hey, I'm going to vote for this person because he helped me put these criminals on, and that's why I hate to see, these politicians going around with these guns and stuff like these, right? This is what police need. This is what we need in the
yeah,
community. That ties us in with that, and then that's why people have a hard time. And then what happens, no matter what, and to the listeners out here, no matter how impartial you think some officers are, I'm telling you, I've seen politics, I've seen the discussions about civil rights, I've seen the discussions about peaceful protest. I've seen those type of discussions split police departments.
yeah,
Uh, black on one side, white on one side, Republicans on one side. And I don't care what people say, that does make it very difficult for people to work together for a common cause. But I have seen that. And so that is why I truly believe that you have to keep politics out of law enforcement, out of any type of public safety, because we get pulled into the middle of that. I hate to see that. I really do. I hate to see that.
Yeah. Well, Keith, I want to remind everybody who's watching this live on Facebook Live and on LinkedIn Live, as well as our YouTube channel, that tonight we're talking about ML King, Policing in America, the last 50 plus years. As we know, Monday is the national holiday for Martin Luther King's birthday. And so, as always, try to participate in some type of an event program to honor and recognize this man who, along with so many others, fought for the rights that we have today. And Monday he would be 94 years old. And Keith, and I think as we talk about this topic tonight, how many people are really still engaged with civil rights? There's so much going on. There's so much on social media, and some people who even probably watching our podcast show or listen to it, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to listen to that because of just their disconnect. But then when something happens, then they've got a lot to say. And so I want to play. I'm gonna play this clip of an incident that took place in New Orleans. The reason when I found this clip, Keith, it reminded me of what took place with Martin Luther King and so many others back in 1963 and in the 60s during the height of the civil rights marches. And here is a grown man who was shedding tears because of his encounter with these state troopers. And it took me back. And I remember I asked you this question, and I asked those who are listening, just how far have we come when it comes to stopping police brutality? Just watch this clip, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Thinking I was gonna die that night.
What we see is officers treating people less than human. What I think when I hear that these videos are delayed is that Louisiana State Police is working to get their story together.
I kept thinking I was gonna die that night because all I can do was breathe, and try to keep myself from just going out because he got my face mashed down in my pot of water. I was scared.
There exists a mindset at Louisiana Police that they do not see the humanity in Black and brown people. When they see our children crying, they don't see theirs. And that is a testament to the pattern and practice that exists, that we could brutalize people as a state official, murder them, and not have any remorse. murder of Ronald Green, for example, where Trooper Hollingsworth bragged that he beat the ever-loving F word out of him. And I want you to sit with for a second the humanity of his mother having to sit there and watch her child brutalized while he said, "I'm your brother." That's what Mr. Green told them. And so they don't see the humanity in us. Instead, they use their badge as a tool to lynch them. Call your U.S. congressman and U.S. senator and ask them to pressure the DOJ to open a patent and practice investigation. I think that's the biggest thing that people can do at this point.
You know, Keith, watching that, very disturbing, but also it takes us back some 50, 60 years that Black men, how they were treated by state troopers, by police officers in the 50s and 60s is still happening in 2021, 2022. And I asked this question, why hasn't the police brutality stopped when we've seen the beating of Rodney King, we've seen the choking of Eric Garner? All these things continue to happen, and it is and to know that we are in this profession to change some things. And Reggie Wilson just said in the chat room, wow, because that, Reggie, that is a powerful video. And what's most disturbing is that here's a grown man crying because of how these grown white troopers treated him, Keith. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
People will argue with you, and I've had officers argue with me that brutality has been minimized. And then when you start talking to them, it's not that it's been minimized; it's the fact that it's got a new name, and it's excessive force. So it's the exact same thing.
Same
brutality
thing.
Excessive force, but that's because you don't hear the brutality thing. The people say brutality, that might be the only term that they know, but to the point of it, excessive force. And we all know that there's certain, let's just think about this. Mr. Green, he was terrorized. And for 2 to 3 years, those guys had been still riding around in their cars like nothing's happened.
Yeah.
And I was at a Noble event last year in Baton Rouge and met the new colonel for the state police. And we were talking, man, and he was basically in tears talking about what had taken place and how the state had dropped the ball. When you see this, the problem that I think people need to understand, it's not the point of the excessive force. It's the point of you've got people out here wearing guns and badges that still think that they can do this, and they're covering it up. Yeah, and they disguise it under the fact of reaction to resistance. And so reaction to resistance means this person was resisting. Well, if you and I've talked about this, the force of continuum, you can always never go at a level above what the reaction or the action that the person is showing. But, we've gotten to a point where it's, I can punch you and I can justify it. I can tase you and I can justify it. I can articulate it. This is the thing that people need to understand. People need to sit down and ask their police chiefs, what type of training, what does your statistics look like? I guarantee you the average citizen, whether it's black or white, will not or has not sit down and talk with their mayor, their city manager, their police chief, say, let me look at your statistics on levels of uses of force, and what the demographics look like.
Yeah.
You know, when you start talking discretion, I mean, there are people, you know, Sarah says that that's when you talk to a lot of African American, especially civil rights activists, that's a word that they hate when it comes into related to police discretion.
Discretion and qualified immunity.
Right, man. Those types you want to go to a meeting and bring those topics up and start saying, well, officers have that discretion. Man, you're gonna be there 3 or 4 hours listening to stories about discretion, and that's how that's one of the things we never want to take away from law enforcement. But I think at some point we're getting to that point where we're going to lose the ability to say we use our discretion.
Yeah.
Because what's my discretion is different than your discretion. Yeah. I still think discretion comes from the heart and the mind.
It does.
I think it has to.
Yeah.
I think it has to. So, Virgil, we talked about body cameras. Body cameras are an amazing resource. One of the best resources that's ever been made for law enforcement. But until a body camera can tell you what's in a person's mind before they act the way they do is on the law enforcement end,
mm-hmm.
they're it's not the solve all. It's not the thing that makes things better.
Yeah.
Because if it had, but then again, if it had to be for body worn cameras, we would not have had the evidence regarding the Brother Green situation or George Floyd or any of the other homicides that occurred.
Yeah.
We still got to realize we still don't have a way to measure someone's heart, soul, and mind. Yeah.
Well, and Keith, and just like the incident that we're talking about now, the video clip that I played, those state troopers all the way up to the highest level you could get then with the Louisiana State Police did everything they could to cover that up, to make sure that the public was not aware of that body cam footage. And if I'm not mistaken, Keith, we talked about something related to this on a previous podcast show where I believe a Black Louisiana State Trooper was terminated because he spoke out against this type of behavior from his former troopers at one of their troop divisions in Louisiana. So, even those who, and we all say, black and blue, if you black and if you ain't with the blue, then you're going to get treated just like anybody else.
Well, it's going to be the same thing if you're white and you're not with the blue. If you're Hispanic, you're not with the blue. You're going to be ostracized and going to be an outcast. And there is that possibility. There's that probability that when you need some assistance, you're not going to get that assistance.
Yeah,
that's just fact. I've been there. I've lived that. So these are things that go on.
Yeah. Well, Keith, I want to remind everybody who is tuning into the podcast show that we're talking about the ML King Policing in America, the last 50 years, as we come up on ML King's holiday this Monday. And but we're talking about parts of Martin Luther King's speech then was police brutality. And there was police brutality that he was subject to, so many others were subject to before the March on Washington and even after the March on Washington. And it's concerning the fact that we are still dealing with some of that. And Keith, I've got another clip to play, and I hope those who are watching will stay tuned and watch this clip, because they have so much significance to what took place in 1963. And Keith, and I'll say this, and to those who are listening, how often when as we come up on the ML King holiday every year, how often do you watch some of these documentaries that talk about the civil rights era, what took place back then? That's, yeah.
Well, I will tell you that what I get from a lot, especially from a lot of the newest generation, is that happened back then. Or, man, I couldn't have been a slave because I would have done this.
Yeah.
Or, man, that stuff's not happening now, man. That's what. So you get that response. We have some very special young people who, man, they're still fighting the fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're still fighting the fight. But when you tell me that you don't vote because your vote won't make a difference, and then when I start explaining that people have died, oh man, there you go with that again. Nobody wants to hear that. I shut down.
Yeah.
I shut down, because at that point you don't understand that's bigger than you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, Keith, and to those who are watching this, I've got another clip I want to play that again puts in the context of what we're talking about. The ML King policing in America in the last 50 years.
Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
African Americans in Alabama have had enough. In spring 1963, in the state's largest city, Birmingham, they stage nonviolent demonstrations. Wallace responds. Protests are banned. Those arrested forced to pay high bail. Then, America's most prominent civil rights leader comes to Birmingham. April 12th, Good Friday. Martin Luther King Jr. and Ralph Abernathy lead a march from the 16th Street Baptist Church. They are arrested. It is here that King pens his now celebrated letter from Birmingham jail, defending the resistance of African Americans. In solitary confinement, he writes, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." The letter becomes a touchstone for the civil rights movement.
Keith, watching the beginning of that video where that governor of Alabama then so stood up there and talked about segregation now and segregation forever.
You talking about the one where the guy's sitting up there next to him smoking a cigarette with the leather jacket on, man?
Yeah. And the fact that Alabama back then was one of the most segregated states in the United States. And, there still is police brutality in Alabama. There's still police brutality in Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma. Every state has experienced a lot of police brutality. And I have to say that I don't believe some of those who are in positions to change some things as we are and have been are there for the right reasons. I think they want to say, well, hey, we've got it posted on our website that, we're about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're doing this and we're doing that. It's just like you're checking the boxes off to say this is what we're doing, but you're not really doing it when you are not being transparent with the public when these types of interactions occur between a police officer and somebody in the minority community, especially in the Black community.
Well, you need to hear, I wish the communities could be privy to the conversations that go on in boardrooms or in executive staff meetings. When certain, supervisors or officers or briefings, when these type of things are laughed at or talked about. I mean, you hear stories during the protest of the George Floyd murder, and you hear about SWAT team members and special response team members saying stuff like, "I can't breathe," and laughing about it. Who is this, guys? I can't be. I mean, you hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't address that kind of stuff, I tell the story about preparing for, as a police chief riding around the city, looking at the protests during the George Floyd deal, and before the officers were out there going into the debriefing and seeing white officers on one side and Black officers on the other side. And as a chief, bringing that up and say, this bothers me that, we're supposed to be together. And when you even walk into this situation that split the country is so split at that time. But then for a chief to walk into a briefing room and see white officers and supervisors on this side and Black officers on this side with Black supervisors, and then to say something about it and be chastised, basically say, I saw a segregated department. And that means Black and white, not just white, but Black and white. And that, how can you, and to be chastised for that. That just shows you what the heartbeat of the nature of the profession is that nobody wants to talk about the ugly things. They want to talk about the good things that we're doing, but nobody wants to talk about the ugly things that are the truths behind what we're doing.
Well, you're right. They want to talk about the good things. They want to talk about, hey, we got out of here. We made these arrests. We done, which all of those things are good. That's what we are supposed to be doing to protect our communities. But at the same time, what are we doing to make sure that every demographic feels safe with their encounters with the police officer? Keith, I watched a video on YouTube where this state trooper, I want to say up around New Jersey or somewhere, literally pulled the driver's side window, and broke it, and angrily and physically tried to remove the person out of the driver's seat. And it's like, at what point, how does your anger get to that level when you're dealing with somebody on a traffic stop? And it goes, that's police brutality.
We're dealing with humans, man. We're hiring humans. And I think people forget that, they got to do that. There's not a test in the world that can find the most perfect human. And I think we do a really good job. I think some departments do better than others. But I think the thing about it is what led up to that. You can't tell me there was not an incident prior to that didn't have the warning signs and signals and whistles that something was right. People just ignored it. I'll tell you that there's a different method in policing when it comes to troopers. There's a different method in policing when it comes to people believe there's a different method when it comes to the troopers. They believe it's a different method when it becomes the sheriffs. They believe it's a different method when it becomes to local municipality. That's BS. Policing is policing is policing. Law enforcement is law enforcement. We all have to follow the same state laws, federal laws. Mm-hmm. Our policies may be a little bit different, but we all have use of force policies. I mean, response to resistance policy. Now we all have deadly force policies, driving policies. So it's that we get that mindset, because I can tell you, troopers' mindset is, I'm out here by myself. I mean, they used to train that way. It was that mindset of the survival. I'm out here by myself, do whatever I need to do to survive.
Yeah.
I think they've gotten away from that. You know, we talked about earlier is have things changed? I will say that on the educational and the state standard part of it, there are standardized processes in place. So I've seen law enforcement become more of a standardized educational process. Doesn't mean you have to have a 4-year degree, but there is some educational component of, if nothing else, you have to go to the academy, and there has to be continuing education. So we've seen that, because there were times back when we talk about civil rights, all you had to do was walk in, shake the police chief's hand, or the police chief knew your daddy, your granddaddy, or your granddaddy or uncle worked on the department, shake hand, you're police. You can get no training. Here's your gun. Here's your billets. Here's your nightstick. Here's your slapjack. And here's your bullets. No training. Here's your keys. You're ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's the scary part when we look back at, you know, decades and decades ago, in how things were, and still, Keith, in some small and rural towns, that's still the case with some of these small and rural police departments.
I can't let you put that just on rural towns, because there's some big cities that do the same thing, brother. There's some big cities that have that mentality, man. And so not as many as rural areas.
Yeah.
But it's just policing as a whole. You know, it's not the policing that I got into a long time ago, thank goodness, but it's not the policing where we need to be.
Yeah.
It's not the policing that we need to be. But I can't let you put it just on small towns.
Well, and I think the majority of that, you know, the percentage of that comes from small and rural police departments. Meaning that you don't have to go through a process. The police chief knows your father or your brother, your uncle,
brother. That happens.
But I know it happens now in big cities because it's all about who you know.
Hey man, try to put a nepotism policy in place at a department where you had brothers working with brothers, husbands working with wives, brothers working for brothers, things like that. Try to put that nepotism policy. And the first thing people say is that you're telling me that, I mean, you're cutting out on, you're damaging generations and generations of family.
Family history. Yeah.
And sometimes, Pam says it right. Sometimes it does look like, hey, what's the qualification for being a police officer? Well, he can breathe. He can breathe. He can count.
He doesn't have a criminal
history.
Yeah.
Man, he was in the military.
Even though he can't read, but
he can't read. So that's the qualifications. We forget about the back. Thank goodness states do require psychological. But I was telling somebody the other day, psychological tests.
It's easy to get around that.
Yeah, well, you heard in the Aaron Dean trial, the guy that killed the young lady in Fort Worth, there was a psychologist that failed him. He failed it miserably.
And he still got hired.
The state of Texas has an appeal process where it goes before a board of 3 psychologists, and those 3 psychologists overruled this one psychologist and said, give this guy a break. And everything this first psychologist said in his report is the exact thing that they found out when he killed this young lady.
Yeah. And that's why the city, that's why that family is, and I believe they settled. But why should it go through
that if you do your work on the front end?
Yeah, exactly. And so Keith, man, we're coming up on the last minutes of the podcast show, man. And as we talk about the ML King Policing in America, the last 50 years, and, Monday is the ML King holiday. And for all, a lot of people are off on some jobs. There's a lot of parades that take place. But the one thing that I see that's missing, Keith, is the emphasis to address these issues that Martin Luther King addressed, Medgar Evers addressed, Jesse Jackson addressed. All of these civil rights leaders addressed these things in the 60s and the 70s. And it seems like now this generation, it's all about who's putting on the best parade, who can get out and do you have all these kids dancing and doing whatever. And it's become a show. And you've got all these different people putting their cars in the parade. Nothing to really address and talk about police brutality, talk about social issues, talk about homelessness, talk about poverty. It has totally gotten away from the purpose for the ML King holiday.
I don't think people really, a lot of people now have done their homework on MLK, have done their homework on Medgar Evers, have done their homework on John Lewis. You know, you left Malcolm out.
Malcolm X, yeah.
You got to put Malcolm in there.
Yeah.
And so you got to put my frat brother Huey Newton in there too, man. Come on now. Come on now.
Yeah.
But I think you and I just got to keep pushing these topics, man. And
yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. And I think, you know, Keith, and you know, we're going to find ourselves right back here again on another Thursday in 2024, asking this same question again.
23.
23?
Yeah, it's 2023, man.
Well, it's 2023 now, but I'm
I get
saying
what you're saying, in January 2024. I got you. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay.
Come on, brother. Keep up with me, man. I know you love.
You say stuff. You say stuff a lot of times when you mix up. So I just thought that's one of your mix-ups. So I just wanted to correct you, man.
Yeah. So we're gonna find ourselves back here again next year, talking about what has changed. What changed in 2023? Was police brutality once again at the forefront of between that took place?
Right.
So, so Keith, man, you know, as always, brother, it's always good to get together with you, brother, and to have these informative conversations on our podcast show, man. It's good, and I want to encourage people, get out and truly do something and celebrate the ML King holiday this Monday, and not just go to a parade and try to have a cookout.
You know what, man? You're absolutely right. But I want you to come back next week, and I want you to tell the listeners how many sweet potato pies you ate. Man,
I'm gonna tell you right now. I'm gonna eat one. I'm gonna eat.
You're gonna eat a whole sweet potato. You're gonna eat an entire.
Well, I'm not gonna eat the entire sweet potato.
Everybody heard you say you're gonna eat one.
Well, a slice.
Come on, man. A big slice.
A small slice.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But all right, man. Anyway, man.
All right, brother. All right, it's been good, brother, and we want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining us. And we will see you again next week. We're going to have on a special guest on our podcast show, so make sure you tune in for another episode of You and the Law podcast show.
All right, peace. All right.